guys, I'm really happy to be back because I've been gone for a while. I haven't done a video since last Wednesday and it's Tuesday now, so it's almost been a full week, which is really weird because I don't think I've gone that long without making any videos. It's really great to be back. Today's video is going to be on pro tips on how to identify good cards. Before I actually get started with the video, I am going to be talking about every single color, but at the same time, this is 100% just my opinion. If I say a specific card in my opinion is bad, please don't feel bad about it or think that I'm like just trash talking the specific card or the game. It's just how I see it and how I've learned to play, what I think is important to know. The cards that I'm going to specify are good. I do, however, believe are truly good cards. I wouldn't say something is good if I don't think it is, but once again, that could be different in someone else's mind. So if I say anything about anything that you don't agree with, feel free to let me know what your, kind of standpoint on the card that I might not like is, and maybe we can have a discussion about it in the comments. Maybe you can kind of sway me over into thinking that the card is good. Maybe I can sway you into thinking that it's not, or maybe if you hear my opinions on it, you might change your mind. So please note that I'm not trying to be some crazy elitist. There's a lot of different things that go into picking a card. Sometimes it's very budget friendly, whereas certain cards are expensive and people can't get them. And I 100% understand that as well. So if you can't get any of the cards and you have to use a cheaper version of a card that's kind of similar but not quite there, it is of course not as optimal, but if that's the situation you're in, then more power to you. Just enjoy the game. 100% is the most important thing you can do. I love Force of Will and didn't think I'd get into competitive play. Most of the time I play casual decks anyway. If anyone knows me, I never pick up like the tier 1 meta deck, even though I have a playset of every single card and play that at locals. Even at big events, actually, I'll just play whatever I like. So always aim to do that first. This is just for people that might want to really be getting into competitive play, or people that want to just identify them in cards in general so that they may maybe still find budget cards, but find a better budget option in general. I'm not going to be showing off any of those cards personally, but I hope that the kind of tips I show you to identify these cards will help you pick those cards out on your own. So with nothing else, let me get into the specific colors and explain what I think is important to know and what I think specifies a card as good. So starting off with light, I have Percival. Percival on enter lets you check the top 5 cards of your deck, and if you see a Regalia or Knight of the Round Table amongst it, you can add it to your hand. You can also banish this card to prevent damage to any Knight of the Round Table on the field or a J-Ruler. This card is probably, in my opinion, the greatest card in the format right now. I think with the meta shifting to Regalias and your J-Ruler being very relevant in your whole deck building, other than of course maybe Blazer, which wouldn't really need to be protected because his enter effect is enough for him to benefit a lot. Even if he's destroyed, you just gain so much from it that it doesn't really matter, especially because most Blazer people play the redstones anyway, so you don't really lose too much for losing the red so late in the game. Percival in general is just amazing. What you need to know about this card is at first the cost. A 1-drop that can search two different genres in general. So knights, so it's even if you don't run knights, you can hit another copy of a Percival and or the Regalia itself. If you don't hit the Regalia and you hit the Percival, that's another attempt to just dig through and more for your deck and pick another card. The fact that the rest of the cards go on the bottom and doesn't shuffle, I personally think is actually to its advantage. There's a lot of plays I do with Angels where I could put Dignified Seraph, which I only run one of in my Arla deck, on the bottom of my deck. That way I know I'm never going to draw into it, so my Celestial can pull it out for sure. So I actually think that actually benefits you more than it does hinder you. And then the last effects to banish itself to prevent damage to a J-Ruler is insane. The fact that you don't have to like tap to do this, the fact that you don't have to pay 1 and banish to do this, the fact that it's just banished this is so, like, it's totally fine because he's 2/2. I mean, well, I say he because this is normally a man, but it's, sorry for that. If I keep referring to it as a he, I'm sorry. It's normally a she in this game, but Percival in the story of King Arthur is of course a boy. So this card is just absolutely insane. I think it's by far the best card in this format. It does so much. Thinning out for Regalias is the most important thing you can do, especially because most decks play 2 Regalias, like 2 different ones I mean. So being able to hit maybe 1 of each and choosing which one's better suited for the situation is just really great. It's not like, you just top 3 cards and if it's a Regalia you add it to your hand. 5 is so much in a 40 card deck, especially because after your first 5 hand, there's only 35 cards left in your deck anyway. And if you're going second, you drew a card, so that's 34. There's just so much that this card does. The fact that it searched Knights of the Round Table too is really relevant because of Bedivere. Bedivere is my next example of why this is a great light card. Of course, the fact that, well, let me explain the effect at first. When this card enters the field, you get to remove from play a card on the field with attack 1,000 or higher. And of course, not every deck plays that, but there is a lot of workarounds. Recently in my Arla deck, I put in a little redstone. And of course, if I see that stone early, I'm always going to call the colors that benefit me. I'm playing green, white, and blue, so those are 3 different colors I can call depending on what my hand is. I was playing against a blue deck where they had a Cinderella, and it was at 8/8, and I hit my my little redstone, and you know, I had 2 lights, and that was my 3rd stone. And I had a Cheshire in my hand, and I didn't have any blue because the other 2 lights were Gusting Skies. So I was like, I'm going to need blue for my own Cheshire, but this is actually something I can do as well. So I made it blue, played my Cheshire, you know, ended my turn. The player attempted to attack. I think I used a bow and Justice Godsword or something, and they returned Cinderella to the hand and then replayed it. And then on my turn, I was able to use the little redstone to pump Cinderella to 1,000 because it targets any resonator. It doesn't have to be my own. And then I summoned Bedivere and killed it. So there's a lot of ways you can kind of amplify even your opponent's attack. This is, of course, it's not something that's going to be happening all the time, but the fact that this card already kills anything that's a really big threat is great. And then the fact that you can kind of mitigate small stuff just makes it even better. The 7/7 target attack is also amazing. I mean, that's going to kill anything that's other than an 8/8 like I mentioned with Cindy, which I said is kind of, you know, mitigated with the whole little red play, which of course is, I'm not trying to say that's like this super pro play. It's just something that could happen, but it's not going to always happen by any means. But the fact that it's 7/7 and gets target attack stuff isn't amazing in its own. The fact that if you are playing Knights and Gwaine can make this into a 9/9 is even better. There's just so much that this card does right now that I think it's great. Even if you're playing against a deck that doesn't have any thousands and you don't even have a little redstone, and you play this at 3 as a 3-drop 7/7 target attack, it's going to put a lot of pressure on your opponent being able to selectively destroy certain resonators that you want by attacking it. And it's something that they have to respond to because of how big it is. So these 2 alone for like the Knights of the Round Table genre are just amazing cards. I think for light, these both do a lot. I wouldn't essentially play like 4 of this or anything. I personally play 1 to 2 in every light deck I make, but in general, these are just really, really strong cards. So you always want to make sure that what I mean to also explain is the fact that also makes these really good is the understanding of resource. You have to understand that every time you play a card, you need to get something in return from it or do something really strong to your opponent. If I summon a Bedivere and they do have 1,000, removing it from the game not only removed the card from the game, of course, and you got rid of it, but essentially you're getting a resonator that you lost nothing for, because if you have, let's say, 2 cards in your hand and this is one of them. You play this, you remove their card, you still essentially have 2 cards in your control. You have the 1 left in your hand and the 1 on the field. You got rid of their card, so they now -1, and now they have to kill this. So if, let's say, you summon this, kill their card, and then they flame with the Outer World this, you essentially used 1 card to deal with 2 of their resources. They had to flame this, and you got rid of their card. Same with Percival. If you summon a Percival and get a card, and they're just using some kind of like beat stick monster that they try to attack with, and you just block and kill it, your Percival not only killed the card that attacked by trading, but you also got a card in return for summoning it. So of course, assuming you do hit a Regalia or Knight. So that's really important to note, that you want to use cards always to waste resource. Grim is also a very good example of a really good light card. This, of course, would never go in any deck unless you're siding into it against black, or if it's a meta that's very black heavy. I wouldn't main this deck main this card by any means, but I just wanted to explain why it's good. Just like Bedivere, if you summon this against a deck that's dark, you can essentially kill the strongest dark monster in the game, like Mephistopheles, at the cost of 2. You would, of course, take 500 for targeting it, but it's totally worth it. It would remove it from the game, and you would have a 5/5 beat stick that now, if they thunder, is the same situation as Bedivere. You got to remove their card, and this is going to eat the next kill spell, it's going to eat the next block, it's just going to do so much. They now have to respond to this. Why these kind of cards are so strong, like cards that are monsters by removal, is always because you have to deal with the card itself. If you use a card like Stoning is an incredible card. It's a great 1-for-1. You get to selectively destroy any card you want. but your stoning goes to the graveyard and it was a 1-for-1. With a card like this, you play it, you remove their card, and they now have to deal with this card. So it's going to take 2 cards to get rid of it, unless, of course, they play a card that also kills this. Like in this situation, they use Carmilla and destroy Grim. Now you're in the situation you try to put them in. They use the card to get rid of your card, and now you have to get rid of their card again. So it's very important to note that it's more important to use these kind of cards than it is to use cards that just blankly have a lot of attack or try to put a lot of pressure on your opponent. The next example I have is Celestial Wing Seraph and Dignified Seraph. I think these cards are actually extremely strong right now. Of course, Celestial Wing Seraph on its own, when you play it, it doesn't take anything away from your opponent, and it doesn't immediately give you anything until its Enter activates, which of course puts a level 4 or lower angel from your deck into the field, I mean. And this is really great because, see, it's the same concept of just wasting your opponent's resource. If I summon a 1,000 flyer that summons an 8/8 flyer, what makes this specifically different than any other card that summons cards from the deck? For example, Pandora, I think it's like Chanter of History, and then Grim, the Inspiring King or something. Those cards are both great. Pandora can pay 2 Awakening, so at the cost of 3, it brings Grim out in the field. But what I don't like about that specific play is when you wait till turn 3 to play Pandora to then pull out a Grim, your opponent still has been kind of summoning a bunch of blockers at this whole time, so it kind of leaves you behind in turns, if that makes sense. So it's like they're just going to block everything you invested in. With flyers, it's totally different, because when you summon these, your opponent knows that if, let's say, if you have a lot more life, and even this even heals for 300 for every angel you have when it attacks. So let's say they have let's say they have a Lancelot and they attack with Lancelot. You're totally free to take that Lancelot hit, because you know next turn you're going to heal to 600 anyway. They have to really worry about what you're going to be. They have to worry about removing these, because you're going to get a free 1800 and you're going to heal 600 damage, and they're flyers, so there's nothing they can do to block them. So every card isn't technically good if it pulls another card out. It's still a great card. Like Pandora and Grim are good cards, but I'd much rather invest in having a better early game and use these late game than I would using Pandora and Grim early game and having them just easily respond to Grim, losing. I mean, he's 1 Thunder. 1 Thunder kills Grim, and then, you know, you would have a Pandora that's just 3/3 on the field. So, not to mention it can both be blocked and destroyed by a lot of early spell cards. So, having a 3-drop Pandora that summons a Grim, I think is a lot weaker than having a 5-drop Celestial that summons a Dignified, and then having the heal and having the flying. So, I think that's really important to note too. Just always make sure you use cards that give you something in return, or take something away from your opponent, while putting a lot of pressure as well. And then the last card is Breath of the God. This is not a card that's used a lot in the meta. I don't personally use this card either, but I don't think it's a bad card by any means. It says it's 1 light, 1 colorless, but you can pay the full cost for free if you control a saint. I mean, if you're targeting a saint. And it says target J Resonator you control cannot be targeted by spells or abilities until the end of turn, and then you draw a card. The draw card is mandatory, so when you play this card, even if your target is destroyed in the chase and this never resolves, you're still going to draw a card. And I wanted to use this as an example as a good card, because a lot of people I see use cards like Protection of Seraph, which is an addition that says your card can't be attacked or targeted. I personally don't like cards like that at all, because they're so vulnerable in the chase. If you attempt to use Protection of Seraph and they, let's say, Flame of the Outer World the card before it goes through, you're now losing the Protection of Seraph that's going to hit the graveyard, and you're losing your Resonator. If I try to attack with the monster and they Stonington Death, and I play Breath of the God, and then they chase with Flame of the Outer World and kill the card anyway, I'm at least going to draw off my Breath of the God and replace this, while they use 2 cards to destroy my 1 monster when I use this. So a card like this, if you're going to go for protection, it's really important to note that you always want to use cards that kind of give you something in return, so that your opponent has to spend more resource getting over it, because the more resource they spend and the more resource you save, you're eventually going to have more advantage over your opponent in general. So for the life package, that was just everything. Once again, I'm not trying to say any other light card isn't good. I just thought these would be the easiest ones to kind of explain what I think is really good about light in general. I think the flying is ridiculous. The searching Percival gives, I think, is insane in this meta, because of how important regalias have been. So yeah, that's everything for light. Moving on to fire, I have Rookeg. Rookeg I think is extremely powerful because this card lets you search any fire resonator in your deck and it's still able to block. How it can't attack, but I think the fact that it can block makes it really good because you could just chump block to search a card. Rookeg is just insane because it sets up so many plays. I think it also combos insanely well with Guinevere, who I think is like one of the greatest cards this format. Guinevere, of course, lets you banish a resonator to draw 2 cards and discard a card. And you can also pay 1 fire and tap it to give something 400 attack, well 4/4, and then that monster is banished at the end of turn. But it's totally fine because that's a lot of pressure. Not to mention that effect isn't used as much anyway. But if you use Guinevere off Rookeg, you would of course search a card first, draw 2, then discard a card. You just added 3 cards to your hand and only lost 1. So I think it's very, very strong. It's also important to note that what makes Guinevere so amazing is the fact that at any point, let's say if this is another card, let's say this is a Lancelot, and you attack with the Lancelot and they use Stoning to Death on Lancelot. Because you're going to lose the Lancelot anyway, the fact that you can just tap her to banish it to draw 2 and discard 1 makes them waste their Stoning to Death to get rid of this, and you plus off removing it anyway. So I think Guinevere is ridiculously good right now. She's probably the best fire card in the entire game, just in general, let alone this format. She sets up too much with how just versatile the game has become. I think there's just no reason why a fire deck would not run Guinevere. It's just incredible in every single way. Being able to just plus off your opponent having to remove your cards is just way too good, let alone being able to just control what you banish anyway. Moving on to Lancelot. Lancelot is ridiculously good for 2 reasons. It's not even the fact that he's a swiftness and the 2-drop swiftness 6/6. A lot of people think just, oh, Lancelot's great because he's such a huge monster. I can get aggro with him and, you know, pressure my opponent. I think people that specifically play fire in the form of aggro and they go too much into using burn spells and stuff, I don't personally think that's the proper way to play the aggro match. I think you can play an aggro match while still keeping your resource extremely high. Going into a Lancelot gives you 2 options. Lancelot is not good because he's swiftness 6/6 at 2-drop. He's good because he has the 700 damage effect. The fact that this card is this powerful and still has the option to remove a card on your opponent's field when he attacks is absolutely ridiculous, because it essentially takes something away from your opponent and gives you something that you normally would have to like have risk and reward for. Most fire cards that are, you know, swiftness and high stats is kind of like either low defense or something. So it's like, you know, if I get that big attack in, I'll get an attack in, but I'm vulnerable to being destroyed. Lancelot doesn't have that problem. If you play Lancelot and you attack and use his effect, which is to pay 1 red to gain 100 attack, and if he's 1000 attack, he deals 700 damage. If they have only 1 card on their field and you attack, pump this to 1000, destroy that card and get 1000 damage in, that is absolutely ridiculous. The fact that you even just killed something, even if the damage you were doing was just 100 and not 1000, that would just be so good for something that's so strong. I mean, of course, if it was 100, I wouldn't use it. I'm trying to say that if he had an effect where if you destroy the resonator with this effect, any battle damage this card applies is only 100, it would still be absolutely insane. The fact that if they block this, they're having to deal with 6/6. If they don't block it, you can blow something up. If you just are trying to get damage and you can pump it for no reason, this card is just absolutely insane. And I think that a lot of people use it for the wrong reasons. They just use it thinking that, oh, this card's, you know, really fast and really strong, so it's good. But, you know, like I said, taking something away from your opponent when you attack is more resource that you're taking away from them, and now they have to use a card to kill this. So you're going to end up taking 2 cards away from them with the cost of 1. So it's just really important to note that Lancelot's great for that reason, in my opinion, and not for the fact that he's just really fast and really strong. Moving on, Flame King Shout I think is an extremely powerful card right now. I actually don't normally like combo cards, but the fact that most fire decks do run Rookeg, the fact that Rookeg can just search the card that you're going to summon off Flame King Shout makes it extremely powerful. This card does 400 damage to all resonators on your opponent's board, and then you get to summon a fire resonator that's 3 cost or less, and it gains swiftness until the end of turn. This is just ridiculous because it kills everything that's like any green ramp, even Light's early game. Light normally mixes really well with blue or green, so you're going to be using familiars and Cheshires. The fact that this will kill all the Percivals, all the Cheshires, all the Cheshire Cats and just everything that you can block with, and then you're going to even summon something even like a Lancelot right after is just ridiculous. I don't think it's I think it's a little too strong. I wish it was 400 to both players field and then you summon something, but just the fact that you can even just do these two together is ridiculous. What I think makes it even crazier is summoning Snow White. A lot of people for some reason have been using Loop Guru, which I actually have. I'm going to actually discuss why I think these two cards are specifically nowhere near in each other's tier. Oh god, that rhymed, I'm so cheesy. So Snow White says that if this card attacks, you get a passion counter, and you can remove a passion counter to do 300 damage to a target. If you combine that with Flame King Shout, you're doing 400 to their whole board, and then that 300 that gets off Snow White can just take care of the very last bit of life left on a card. If they have a 7/7 and a bunch of 400s or less, you would kill all the 400s, attack with Snow White, then do 300 to the 7/7 that now only has 300 defense, and kill that too, which I think is absolutely ridiculous. It also can get over anything that's even stronger. If they have arrested Gwyber and you killed all their chump blockers and you attack into the Gwyber is taken 400 damage from Flame King Shout. It's now going to take 500 damage from her first strike, and then you're going to remove the counter to do 300 damage, which is a total of 1200. It would kill a Gwyber at just while not even having to lose this card, which I think is absolutely insane. The first strike on this makes it so much more relevant than a card like Loop Guru would ever be, that I don't actually understand why people are using Loop Guru this meta. I've seen this card actually been used a lot at my locals anyway, and I don't get it. The 100 damage you get in is very minuscule. It doesn't really do anything. The stats are of course really good because the 7/7 is really powerful. I just don't think that the 200 attack difference when compared to a card like this is totally worth it when you have the first strike. I think the first strike is ridiculous. The fact that she comes with swiftness, I mean, they both have swiftness, of course, but she has the first strike and swiftness anyway, so she's matched up in that department. She does 300 damage, so it almost makes her total 800, so she's almost an 8/7, which is essentially better than Loop Guru 2. And she's even 2 fire and 1 colorless, so unless you're using a full fire deck, it's essentially easier to summon Snow White anyway. So I don't personally like Loop Guru. This is one of the cards I'm going to use as an example as a bad card. I don't think this card is good by any means. Once again, if you're playing like under budget or if you're of course playing a werewolf deck and it benefits the werewolves, it is very good in that. But in just a general meta where you're talking about a Flame King Shout target or you want an aggro card, I think Snow White is a million times better. So I wouldn't use a card like Loop Guru. Moving on, there's Blazer. Blazer is an insane card because he's just like Lancelot. He gives you so much for his summon. If you summon Blazer and it doesn't get Zeked, at this point you get a free 1,100 stat 5 drop that can have swiftness and attack directly, removes anything from the game, which is actually really strong because it kind of punishes stuff like Rezard or Dracula that kind of need stuff in the graveyard, and you're not even like siding it. It's just a good card to have even main deck. So this card just like has anti-hate against those kind of decks, which you just freely get for no reason. It stops stuff like Cheshire, which is of course really good too because they won't be able to keep getting them and just having chump blockers. You'll just be removing them from game. The fact that when it's destroyed, it removes itself from play to come back is what makes it so good. Normally, a big monster would attack. If it gets stoning to death, you paid 5, they paid 2 for stoning to death, and you lose your card. But now it's just going to keep coming back, and there's only so much resource your opponent can use. I mean, they're eventually going to run out of cards that answer this, and once they run out of cards, there's just nothing they can do. It's just free pressure every single churn, and of course it's selective. Maybe one churn I drew into something else I want to play and I could play that. If I don't have anything better, I could summon Blazer and attack. So Blazer's an amazing card. I think it's really strong right now. I think it's going to stay strong for a very long time. There's just not really much you can do against this card if you don't either Zeke it or maybe try to rest it with the card that rests. Try to maybe fly over and get some damage in and have some chump blockers, but once again, if you play this in attack and they even chump block, next turn if you just play Flame King Shout, it just kind of gets you a free swing in again, not to mention like the Snow White you might summon off of it. So I think Blazer is a really, really great card. And then this is one of my examples actually, Amino Habakiri, of a bad card. I feel like I'm going to get the most hate for that because everyone loves this card, but I think this card is absolutely horrible. Once again, fully opinion, don't hate me. This card says you added Resonator Gates 4/4, and whenever it deals damage to your opponent, they take damage equal to the... When you do damage to the Resonator, they take damage equal to the damage the Resonator took. Why I hate this card is I don't like, I played Noble Knights in Yu-Gi-Oh! So I'm saying this from someone who played in a deck that used equip cards as its main kind of like reason to play the deck. Any card that's an equip card always is almost a -1. It's a card that you have to equip onto a card and has to successfully equip to then do something. And then let's say if you have, let's say, Snow White, and you equip this with it. Of course, this is going to be a ton of damage if you get it in, but this is what you have to consider. You're equipping this card, that enters the chase. Between this gap, they can kill Snow White, and you're going to lose both cards. You can successfully equip the card, attempt to attack, they can destroy the card, you lose both cards. You can attempt to play this card on a card, and they can just like Dream of Juliet even or enter it, and the card would just drop off. These cards are just so like, if it said, you know, of course, all of this and then on enter draw a card, it would be great because even if it dies, you get a card in return, just like Breath of the God. But I don't like using cards that are just like this desperate attempt to get more damage in. I think life itself in any game, I think, is a resource. You can pay it, you can gain it. It's something that you have that you can use at your own will in certain decks, and it's something your opponent has to deal with. But if you play the game properly and you play the game the whole way, saving as much resource as possible and taking as much resource away from your opponent as possible, you're going to get enough damage in to win the game. That's normally common sense in any card game. If you just get damage, if you play properly and you waste their resource, gain resource, just keep plussing while minusing them, they're going to be in a situation where they're just going to lose because you're gaining advantage. This is almost like a win more card. You use this card if you try to get an insane amount of damage in, which doesn't make sense because if you play the game properly, you're going to be winning anyway. So having a card that specifically does, let's say, a lot of damage or buff something doesn't make sense, because it's like, why are you bothering using that card instead of a card that could take something away from them or give you something in return to keep playing the game properly so that you can win. Of course, this card can win you many games. I have lost to this card with Susanoo more times than I can count. Like, I was playing a Guiber, and my opponent happened to have these two cards in their hand. They weren't siding at all. They just were playing both of them, and he played it. I had taken early damage, so he killed Guiber. I took 1600, then he swung with Susanoo, and I lost. It's no means a card that can't win you a game or anything, but that whole time, if I didn't summon Guiber, he was going to have a 6-drop Susanoo and this card in his hand. That's 2 cards in his hands that are absolutely useless, that can't do anything on their own. They're waiting for another card to, you know, play on the field to then equip this with it. Then you're having to worry about 2 costs. It just doesn't make sense. There's no reason why you should ever worry about using a card that specifically gives you like a buff or something, unless you can benefit from it like in different ways. Even Rapid Growth, which is a green card, it says it's a 1-drop that gives something 4/4. It's J/Resonator 2. And it's a remnant, so you can use it from the graveyard. So worst case scenario, if I try to buff Cinderella with it and they Snow White, at least later on I can banish it and use it again. But a card like this, I just don't really like. I don't know. I feel like that one I'm going to get a lot of hate for it because a lot of people do like that card, but I don't personally think it's good at all. And then War Dance of the Valkyrie. If you control Snow White and Cinderella, you can rest both of them to use this for free. It does 600 to a Resonator or target player, or you can just hard cast it for 3 and do the same thing. This is once again a bad card because wanting to control Cinderella and Snow White and have them recovered just doesn't really make sense. Of course, you can. There's times where you can use this, but you have to understand that you would need Snow White on the field, Cinderella on the field, and then this card. This card's not searchable. This card's only searchable by Rook Egg. Cinderella's not searchable at all. So you're essentially trying to have a 3-card combo in a deck that can't search all the pieces. And even if you did get this off for free, 600 damage to a Resonator or player isn't worth all that setup. It's also not worth playing 3/4. So that's just, I wanted to use this as an example. Not that anyone thinks this card is good, but I wanted to use it as an example of what too much investment is. Combo decks are fine if you can search certain pieces. For example, in the Resort deck I had made, I had Merlins, and Merlin of course needs for your opponent to discard. And even though I ran 4 Spirals of Despair, you can argue that I might not see them. But I had Oz as well and Soul Hunt, and Oz grabs Soul Hunt. So you can say that, you know, having Merlin is one of the combo pieces, but I can grab the Soul Hunt with Oz, which is the other combo piece, let alone having so many copies of everything else in my deck that work all on their own as well. Merlin's the only one that doesn't work on his own, but his combo piece is searchable, so it's fine. I don't think it's smart to play combo decks where you're just kind of hoping to draw the combo pieces, and then when you don't, you're kind of like, oh my god, I bricked. Like, Bricking in general, unless you're playing a consistent deck and you just open like that one rare chance where, let's say you have a bunch of Cheshires, bunch of Familiars, bunch of Percivals, anything that just kind of gives you a card in return, and you just open like 4 Guibers and I don't know, 2 Thunders or something. That I can understand being a brick. But sometimes a lot of people that play combo decks will open all their combo pieces, all the like, let's say like Cthulhu's, or open all the incarnate targets and none of the low drops, or all the low drops and none of the incarnate targets. I don't think that's you bricking. I think it's just bad ratio design, because most consistent Cthulhu decks don't have that issue, and some of them do, and I feel like if they do, it's because you're just using off ratios of everything and you're not using cards that can search out your combo pieces and complaining that you didn't open both of them in your hand. So I've been guilty of this as well. I'm not trying to like, specify any certain player or anything like that. This is just something that I learned, and I'm hoping I can teach everyone else, because it is really devastating to play those kind of decks and not like them. Like I said, I played Noble Knights for the longest and would hate my hands of all equip cards and no Knights, or all Knights and no equip cards. So it's something that I realized is just, something you have to deal with and somehow find searchable answers for your combo pieces if you do want to play a combo deck, rather than just throw all the cards together and hope it works. So that's everything for Fire. Next up for green, we have Familiar of Holy Wind. Familiar of Holy Wind is great because it replaces itself on its enter. You get to draw a card, and then you can pay 1 green and banish it to do 300 damage. This once again falls into the category of on enter, this card is replacing itself, so you're not losing anything except for 1 green to play it. And then it also has spot removal, or you can block another 2/2 like a Percival and trade off. That's of course even if you banish this card and you're losing it to do 300 damage, something is just really good. You already replaced it for the enter anyway, so at this point losing it doesn't really matter, especially if you're trading off something else too, because then they lose something, you lose something, but you drew a card, so you gained 1. So a card like Familiar I think is really strong. Gretel is something I want to talk about as well. Lots of times I see people playing Gretel in a lot of green decks. Gretel is of course an amazing card, but you have to make sure that you can back up the ramp with a reason to play the ramp. I see a lot of decks that kind of ramp up way too quickly, and then they don't really have anything to use all the mana on, because their hand just kind of goes to crap when you just put a lot of pressure on their board. And I think it's important to note that if you are playing ramp, you have to use your counters very wisely. Use them to take out your opponent's answers that are kind of the more threatening stuff. You want to use Cake Zone on anything like, let's say, a Spiral of Despair, because of course you're now no longer going to discard 1 card and you're going to gain a card off Gretel. This is actually what I think is really nice about Absolute Cake Zone, the fact that you draw if you control Gretel, because it essentially pays off the fact that Gretel didn't replace itself on its enter or take anything away from your opponent. The Magic Stone you get is of course incredible, but I think Absolute Cake Zone just combos really well with Gretel. Zeus is also of course a great green card because it cancels summons. You can also give +2/+2 to your whole board. You can shuffle your opponent's graveyard or make something untargetable. This card is just absolutely insane. But yeah, please note that if you are playing kind of a ramp deck, why Vlad works so good in general is because even if your hand does go to crap, you could just use Vlad to burn your opponent and heal. So all the ramp does have kind of a reason of why you try to push so hard to get so many stones. Whereas in other decks, if you just, if you're playing your counters a little incorrectly and they're taking off your Gretel, so you're not drawing off Absolute Cake Zone, you're going to fall behind and you're going to be drawing 1 card at a time, having a million stones and not really anything to do with it. So these are all, of course, amazing cards, but just be sure to use them really wisely. Use Zeeks on stuff that's immediately going to just be something you can't get over, or Absolute Cake Zone on something like a Flame King Shout that's going to wipe your entire board, or a Spiral of Despair that's going to affect your hand. If they're just attempting to thunder something or stoning something that it's like a feat scene you might have or something, just you might want to let it go through depending on what their hand size is, or what the situation is. But don't just kind of throw it out there because you want to draw the card. Make sure that you're using it wisely so that you can plus up everything you're doing. Oz is another very, very good green card. This card doesn't see a lot of play, and I totally understand that it's not meant for every deck. But the fact that this card can grab a card like Thunder, I think in light the fact that it can grab a Justice Godsword, I think is really strong. With Gleipnir being a Rogalia now, I think that card is a lot stronger than it used to be. You can just force something to block. That's actually a situation I want to talk about. I now run Gleipnir in my Arla deck, as long as and I have Familiars of Holy Winds. If you're playing against something like, let's say it's even Guiber, if I force Guiber to block and I declare an attack with Familiar of Holy Wind, I can then, the Guiber rests, so I'm allowed to use Justice Godsword and shoot it with one arrow. Let's say I didn't have 4, so I couldn't just immediately kill the Guiber that's flying. I can then banish Familiar to do 300 damage. So you do 300 from Familiar, 500 from Justice Godsword, and then 400 from the arrow, which would even kill something like a Guiber. So the fact that Oz can search out spells that can do kind of those kind of combos, and while still being able to get stuff like Thunder, if you are using this in a light deck, you can side into Savior of Splendor against Dark. You have access to searching that as well. If you're playing against the Fire deck and they have Blazers and you just kind of want to like control their field a little bit, you can use you can side Wind of Gods and stack that card on top of their deck, which is of course searchable by this as well. You can even stack something like a Rugig if they don't have a Guinevere to kind of banish it before you get the stack off. But you can stack the Rugig so that they're forced to draw that next turn as well. Oz is just really great. He's not particularly doing anything in the meta right now. I just think that he's a card that people have to look out for, because at any point, if a ridiculous one-drop spell comes out, this card immediately becomes like one of the best cards in green. So I think it's just important to note that this card, like, I mean, it even blocks a Landslot, and of course it's one cost more, but if I summon this and search, let's say, a Thunder, and the Landslot attacks and we trade, I still got the Thunder for doing that, and I killed his Landslot essentially by blocking. So it's important to note that that's just you're going to be plussing off the enter, and of course Lancelot can buff up and just do 700 and kill this, and that would suck, but that's the whole point of going back and forth. So it's important to note that you want to be able to use cards like this that get you something without having to worry about if I play this awesome beat stick, I'm gonna be able to kill his Lancelot, but it's like, sure, but you're once he responds to it with this next card, you're not going to be down a card, and all you did is kill one Lancelot. So grabbing a Thunder with this lets you be able to deal with the Lancelot anyway by blocking unless he destroys it, and then you have a Thunder for later. So just keep in mind that cards that essentially search your deck or thin your deck of cards, you don't, especially in combo decks actually, people need to understand that when you play a card that pulls a card out of your deck, that's one less card that you're going to draw, especially if you're using, let's say if you're playing green and you have cards like this. For every Familiar, you get one less card. For every Oz, you pull a card out of your deck. If you are playing a combo deck and you haven't seen your combos, your other combo piece, let's say you need 2 cards and you have only 1 in your hand, the more you thin, the more likely you are to hit that one card that's still missing anyway, just by regularly drawing, let alone cards like this thinning your deck even more. So it's important to note that getting the cards from this benefits more than just the immediate card you got. It also leaves your deck with the cards that are left. And of course, like I said, if you have a bunch of cards that do this, you're going to just keep gaining resources, and there's nothing your opponent can do unless their deck also happens to be like that, which is what most competitive play is, which is what makes the game really interesting in my opinion. I mean, it's crazy to see someone, summon a Carmilla and destroy a card, and then, let's say if you side a Saber that you just drop an Oz, grab Saber, kill Carmilla, and then now they have to deal with Oz, and then you have to deal with whatever dealt with Oz. And it seems a lot, I see some people playing every now and then that they do like using a lot of additions, which is totally fine. But for casual play, it's fine. But like sometimes people seem to get frustrated, but when they use those cards in like tournaments and then they don't do so well, just note that you always want to make cards that thin your deck or get you a card or take something away from your opponent. Don't focus too much on damage, because the damage will come through just regularly by playing the game. So I wouldn't worry about that too much. And then lastly, an example of a bad green card, Law of Silence. Why this card I think is so bad is because essentially it says target player cannot play normal spells or summon spells until end of turn. If you do this on their draw phase, it means they have to untap and do absolutely nothing this turn but attack with the monsters they have. This card in no way helps you if your opponent's already in the lead. You're just stunning them for a turn, which means they're just going to attack with everything they have on board anyway. If you guys are even in the game, it almost kind of hinders you as well, because if you Law of Silence on their draw, they drew a card and you lost Law of Silence. So there's now one card ahead of you if you guys both had the same amount of cards on the field, let's say the same amount of cards in your hand. They're going to use whatever they have on their field, or their J-Ruler, of course, you can still J-activate and gain advantage like that. And now you're going to draw, and they're going to have full mana open with any card in their hand live. It just kind of puts you back a turn for no absolute reason, and if you're already winning and you use Law of Silence, it becomes a win more card. Just like the Omni, Habakiri, if you're using this card to maybe just get some damage in and prevent them from using any cards, you waited for a situation where you already established a board, you're now going to stun them to get that damage in, instead of just focusing on another card that, let's say like if this was a Zeke's, if you attack and they drop a featsing to prevent damage, you summon this and you prevent the damage, and I mean you Zeke's it, and the card just gets destroyed anyway. The featsing doesn't prevent anything, and you make them lose their cards. So a card like this just isn't good because it doesn't do enough. Talking about featsing, it's important because dropping featsing, of course, doesn't give you anything in return other than the fact that you can prevent damage, but that lets you block killing their resonator, which means you plus off. The fact that you use your one card to deal with their one card means they lost their card, and then on your turn when you recover, you can attack into another rested creature and maybe kill that. You can produce mana, which kind of gives you ahead of a turn, while it's a card that would give you mana that you also just kill something for, so it's not like Gretel where you didn't get something in return. It's just featsing is so good, and it's so like, it was so underrated for the longest until it kind of like shot up in price after the whole Abdul thing, when Abdul was really big and was using this. But yeah, it's just, you always want to make sure, I know I keep saying it, and I know I'm saying it for every color, but it's just, I can't stress enough how important it is to play the game with resource heavy in your mind, just thinking about how I can gain more resource and take resource away from my opponent instead of damage. I see a lot of people just, especially a lot of newcomers, playing the game. Red aggro is always the easiest deck to play. If you like red aggro, you should definitely play it. I don't think there's anything wrong with playing red aggro. I just think that it sometimes doesn't give you the right mindset for the game unless you don't really care about competitive play or not. But even a red aggro deck, you need to understand that your land slots are important because of the removal it provides. Your Snow Whites are important because of the first strike and the removal it provides, not because they're big monsters with swiftness. If you know how to use those effects properly, you'll always kind of keep aggro over your opponent, and you'll be doing what Red Rush does the best anyway. Just don't play it in the sense that I'm going to drop my whole hand and hope to get damage in, and if they stop me, you know, I lose. Like that shouldn't be your mentality. So just keep that in mind. Moving on to blue, I have Cheshire Cat. Cheshire Cat is of course amazing because you can't target it. It can successfully block anything, and there's nothing they can do unless they use a card like Zero to quick cast and, you know, do -2 to everything and kill it. It can't be thundered, can't be Goose Blessed Stone since it can't be targeted, so you always almost get a free block off of it. On enter, you get to draw 2 cards and stack a card, which is just amazing because you're thinning your deck. You can even put something from your hand that was already in your hand that you don't want to see early, maybe like a Dignified Seraph, and then, you know, block on purpose on their turn so that it gets shuffled back into the deck. You can even immediately shuffle it to the bottom. We'll put it on the bottom if you then play, you know, Percival. This will be one of the 5 cards you reveal, and then it'll go on the bottom of the deck at the end phase, and then you get to add something for Percival if you hit that too. So that's always really great too. Cheshire just sets up way too much. This card might be reprinted in the Valentina starter deck. We don't know yet, but if you want to play it safe, just pick them up now. I think if you're a budget player, you should definitely wait because it did say it was going to have reprints from CMF and TAT, and I can't imagine why they wouldn't reprint this card. It's the perfect card to reprint for newcomers because it's one of the hard cards to get for those people who are on a budget. So I think you should definitely wait for the Valentina deck to see if this is a common, but it would be an amazing reprint for those players, so I'm looking forward to that as well. Cinderella is the next card that I think is incredible. The fact that she gains a glass counter and becomes an 8/8 for a 2-drop is extremely strong. Once again, you might wonder, oh, but this whole time you've been saying, you know, beat sticks aren't relevant, you shouldn't worry about having beat sticks. Well, I wouldn't like her if it wasn't for her last effect. The fact that she can return to your hand for paying 2 blue makes her insanely good. You can swing if they stoning to death, you just return it to your hand. They wasted their stoning to death, and you now can replay it and have that counter again. It can successfully block Lancelot while still surviving, even if it does a 700 effect on it, and killing the Lancelot as well, so that's always really important too. It's just such a strong card, and like I said, the fact that I like it mainly is the last effect. If you can keep returning it to your hand, you're not losing this card every time they attempt to remove it, and then playing it just gives you that advantage again. You gain the glass counter again, you're back to being an 8/8, you can block anything. If you block anything and lose your counter, return it back to your hand. So Cinderella is just incredible. Etna is one of the other cards I want to talk about. Hamlin is of course amazing as well, but I want to talk about Etna because it's one of the only cards right now that can discard cards from your opponent's hand that's not dark. I think with Gleipnir being a card now, you can really force your opponent's blockers to be used kind of smart. You can maybe rest a bunch of cards that are threatening, and then on their turn, if they don't remove Etna and they just maybe summon a chump blocker, you can, you know, let's say if you're playing blue, so this is your field, and you're using Gleipnir. You can use Gleipnir to force their only blocker to block, attack with Cheshire Cat just to force it to block. Even though Cheshire is going to die, it's going to get shuffled in the deck, so you'll just get to it later. And then you'll attack with Etna direct, and they'll have to discard a card. So I think Etna in general is a really good card. It's really good against stuff like Blazer, who just keep coming back, so you can just lock it down instead. Of course, your stats make her a little vulnerable because she's a flame target, but if you're using, let's say, Shangri-La in a Valentina deck, she could be a 9/9, which is right outside of Flame's range as well. So that's really important to know too. But I just like Etna because of discard. I mean, it doesn't happen too often, but it's always something they have to respond to immediately because they know if they don't, they're going to have to discard. So I think Etna is a really good blue card. And then just lastly, Forcey. Forcey is Pot of Greed, but for Force of Will, you draw 2 cards, and this is absolutely insane because it's like one of the best top decks, especially late game if you have like 6 to 8 mana and you play this for 2. Any of the 2 cards you draw, you're still going to be able to play with the remainder like 4 to 6 mana you have left. I used this at some point in Arla, and if I had like 7 mana, I would use this, draw 2 cards. If one of them was Celestial, I'd play Celestial and get the Dignified Seraph, which is just ridiculous. The fact that you can just grab 2 free cards just off the top of your deck is just way too good. And I'm really glad they printed this card because I think it's what blue needed. It just lets you keep advantage of your opponent, and they were a little too slow and not tempo-y enough before, but this just keeps constantly giving you answers while waiting to just take them off of your opponent. It just makes it really good, and I really like Forcey, and that's actually just everything for blue. I didn't want to go too much into blue because it's mainly just about keeping hand control. There isn't much other going on with blue right now. There's of course cards like Glimpse of Kaguya and stuff, but I've explained those way too many times in my videos anyway, so I'm just going to head over lastly to black. So dark is in a very strong situation in this meta. With Blazer being so good, producing red, you can have the 2 strongest removal cards, both red and black I mean, in your deck at the same time. Carmilla I think is one of the greatest dark cards. This isn't a card that's seeing much play right now, but I don't understand why. Vampires are very not relevant, so there's a very little chance that your opponent's going to control a vampire even if you're playing against another dark deck, so that her removal will always go off. On enter, she kills a non-vampire in the field, so that's why I'm saying it matters that vampires aren't relevant right now, because if your opponent has a vampire, you can't remove it, but you can remove anything else. The last effect to take control of it, if it's a human, if you have Dracula, it doesn't even matter. This is one of those cards like Bedivere where when you summon it, it kills their card. They now have to worry about dealing with her stats because she's going to get 8 in. If they don't, they have to Flame of the Outer World this, or, you know, if it's a light deck and they decide to Savers, they have to Savor it. However you look at it, this is a card that takes something away from them, and then they have to destroy this, getting rid of this as well. And her stats are pretty big too, so even if you trade with something when you're blocking, it's just extremely powerful, and there's just not much they can do to stop this. Of course, if they Zeeks it, it's the only way, but it's just really nice to know that on enter you can kill something, and then they have to deal with this card too, and that's just 2 cards that they're wasting. Naya is also a very good card. This is obviously something I would never pay 4 for. I would only play this card in a deck kind of focusing towards Incarnation, but it doesn't make it any less bad. Any less good. Naya on enter lets you look at your opponent's hand, and you get to discard a card from their hand. This is absolutely ridiculous because you not only get the fact that you can discard their best card, sometimes you can, along with playing with Spiral, there's been a lot of situations where you incarnate for this turn 2 and you have 2 mana open, you look at their hand, and if it's a green deck, they might have like a Cake Stone and 2 other cards. You discard the Cake Stone and then you play Spiral and discard the other 2. So Naya is just extremely powerful. I think the hand control it provides is just insane. The fact that you also get logic of what cards they have in their hand is just even better. In competitive play, also note that if you use a card that lets you look at your opponent's hand, you are allowed to write it down. If you have like a pen and pad that you're keeping life on, they're not specifically meant, they don't have to like keep their hand open for like an hour so you can write down every single card. But if they show you their hand and you discard one and you remember the other 2 or 3 cards, you're allowed to write them down and cross them off as they use them, so you know you have that knowledge all game. So I feel like that's actually really strong in itself too. Spiral, once again, this card is Delinquent Duo from Yu-Gi-Oh! You get to discard 2 cards from your opponent's hand randomly. Well, they choose, but if you have Pandora, it's random. The fact that they choose doesn't really make it any worse. If you use this on their last 2 cards, it's of course just getting rid of them. If you use this early on when they have maybe 3 cards in their hand, a lot of people now play, you play 2 Regalias maybe turn 1, and then, or 1 to 2 Regalias, summon a monster, you have like 3 cards in your hand. If they went first and now tap for their second stone and Spiral you, you mulligan to have that hand anyway, so they're stopping something that you set up for by, like you mulligan your opening hand, you're most likely going to have 5 good cards now. If you use the 3 that are playable first turn, you most likely have 2 to 3 cards left in your hand that are useful, so if I Spiral you, you're going to lose something important regardless of if it's something that I'm specifically picking, or if you're picking anyway. I just think this card's really, really good. And then Stony to Death. This is the only card that I think I've shown so far that's a 1-for-1, but I think it's insanely good anyway. The fact that it doesn't specify stats like Bedivere does, the fact that it doesn't cost 4 like Carmilla or say non-vampire on it, it's nice to know that you can run a card that can safely kill anything in the game. It can kill a Guiber, so you don't have to worry about needing a Susanoo. It can kill Celestial Wing Seraph, it can kill Dignified Seraph. It can just kill any Resonator in the game, and I think certain cards that are 1-for-1 trade-offs like this are really good, because you also have to consider the fact that this card costs 2 and it can kill something that costs 10. So if they invested that much mana into playing something and you kill it for 2, even though it's a 1-for-1, you're still kind of saving resource in the sense that you have enough mana to play for your next card. So it's 1-for-1, so it's not bad as it is, and it kind of sets up for future plays, so it kind of has more of a use for that as well. And then Dark Pulse. This is of course a card that destroys all level 2 or lowers on the field. Most of the time it's sided against stuff like Blazer Knights, which is really great because you get to essentially kill more than one thing by using one card. A lot of the times it's actually like 3 to 4 cards that end up dying, especially against Blazer Knights. That's just absolutely insane, because using this to just kill everything, even at 4 cost, I mean, Carmilla costs 4 costs, so instead of using Carmilla to destroy one big thing, you use this card and just destroy everything else, and it's an instant, so if you happen to have the mana open during your draw, you can play it, kill everything, and then recover. This card is just absolutely insane, and I think it's also one of those dark cards that are just a must-have in your side, no matter what, well, not no matter what the meta is, because if there isn't low drop spam in the meta, you shouldn't play it, but I just think this card is absolutely amazing, and just adds so much to Dark, which already has so much. So yeah, that's everything for Dark. So thanks for watching, guys. That was my pro tips video. I know it was extremely long, and if you have watched it up until this point, I'm really grateful that anyone would actually take the time to even watch any of it or think my opinion matters. I haven't made a video in a whole week, but every single day I've been thinking about what I can bring, to my channel that'll really help you guys. I really hope these kind of videos do help. I'm doing it absolutely just 100% for you guys. I really hope that it didn't feel a little too long. I know I kind of went off for forever, but my logic has always been I'd rather people invest kind of the extra time, if they do have it, into learning these things, but have me cover absolutely everything so they don't have too many questions. And if they do have questions, I'm always free to answer those as well, rather than, do a quick video on what cards I think are a little good in the meta, and then, when you're playing, you don't really understand why they're good, or why they do why they gain so much advantage, or why they take away so much from your opponent, or why it's important to play them. So I really hope you guys didn't mind the fact that this is an extremely long video. I hope it helped all you new players out there. If you guys haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do, because I do have the product video coming on Thursday on what to buy if you're a new player, what to look forward to. That's coming out really soon. And if you guys do have any questions, just leave it in the comment section below, or message me on Facebook. I have my Facebook post, my Facebook link, in my description, and I will catch you guys next time.